There we go. All right, so book 14 is very different than the others. Previous to this time, we've been laying foundation and acquiring different levels of knowledge about the different aspects of how to live our life. Today, we apply what we've learned. And this is a book that we will see repeated in another form, and matter of fact, several different forms later on. Remember, there are 22 volumes, and we're over halfway through. So this is a practical application of the knowledge that we've been gaining. Starting out with chapter 1, serial lesson 151, finding one's cosmic work. The one thing to remember and to take into consideration is that the serial lessons that are included in course 14 or book 14 were written during World War II. So you're going to still find some antiquated languages. You're going to find some thoughts and, shall we say, statements that probably are not as inclusive as we have in today, but yet still the fundamental teachings are not only practical, they're very applicable. One thing, if you've not had an opportunity to do, is to look at the evidence related to ESP. If you Google this, or you go to Duke University's research center, the Rhine Research Center, the Institute of Parapsychology out in Durham, North Carolina, you find a great deal of documentation that is still not completely accepted within the scientific community, in that there are forces outside of what science can measure and quantify today. And I think this is because of the statement on page 7. We view the universe as a living organic structure guided by a supreme intelligence. And I think that's really essential to remember. In one previous book, we talked about the interrelatedness, often viewed as a tree, where all existence, including what we may not consider to be alive, truly is alive. And we're related to it based upon the vibratory and the ability of it to influence us and us to influence the other aspects of the creation that's around us. Now, the major policy of this universal activity that is discussed is that we are to progress. Life as we know it and as we understand it is about moving forward, gaining knowledge, and applying that knowledge in a constructive way. So to do that, it is really not only to our advantage, we're going to see that it's part of the mandate that we put ourselves in a position to satisfy that purpose as recorded on page 10. So one of the first things that we are to look at, and the first priority, is to find an outlet to where we can express our talents and ability. And it's interesting because I hadn't thought about the comment on page 12 that Zane talks about, of how this is actually even more important than selecting our vocation. Finding an avocation, or finding an outlet for the talents and skills that we have, that we can utilize those, should come even before we selected our vocation. And they call that our cosmic work. Our cosmic work are those actions and activities that build us up, that provide a benefit, not principally to ourselves, but focused on others, and allow us to be an element and a force of change in the world around us. And that's pretty exciting. Now, on page 14, he also makes the point that I think is very apropos, that our cosmic work and our vocation do not have to be the same. That we may end up earning a living, which is really what the vocation is about, that can be totally different from our cosmic work. However, when they run parallel, or at least are interconnected, we have the most leverage and power. The most important thing is to make sure they're not in conflict. And how would you say that there could be in conflict? Well, often that's when it gets into the areas of the end result. If you are, or I find myself in a vocation that promotes greed or hatred or discord, whereas we are called to create and to promote harmony and positive impact and effect in the world, that can be a conflict. And you can say, well, I don't, who would intentionally get involved in something involved in greed? And unfortunately, in this world, there are many people that have vocations, or they will change their work to where it's really all about them, and it's not looking to help and actually may hurt others. So it's just something to make consideration about. So the idea, and this is a concept that he will repeat throughout this book, is having a completely constructive life, a life that in every aspect practices our movement, not toward perfection, because we won't achieve that, but to fulfilling our destiny, our role, and benefiting others. So this idea of a completely constructive life is something that each of us gets to work out. It can be different, and probably is different for everyone here that's joined this webinar, either live or viewing it later. What you are called to do in your cosmic work, what you decide to do for your vocation, can be lived in a way that brings peace and harmony and impact to others. And I think that is so profound, to be able to say that and then be able to show you the methodology to practice it. And that's what this book is about. It's about how to live a completely constructive life. We're not perfect, so we're not always going to be able to practice these things in their perfect form, but here is a way that we can do that. So some key concepts, and this starts on page 18, and that is to look in the beginning, to look at each day as a complete cycle. Now, I hadn't done this. I really hadn't thought about this until, again, reviewing. This is the fourth or fifth time that I've gone through this book. But to really call out that each day is an opportunity to make a difference and to change. If we view that, if I view that today, tomorrow, and the next day is not a do-over, but a new opportunity, then the things that I didn't do well, the failures, either perceived or actual, that I experienced, in a sense, the slate is wiped clean and we get another start. But it requires what he terms persistent and ardent practice. Note the process shown on page 18. And I think this is something that again needs to be our focus, because it's easy to become distracted, to lose focus for the purpose you're called to. People, places, things bear down on us. We can talk about the negative impact that we're experiencing today in 2022 about gas prices. We can talk about the war, the evolving war in the Ukraine. These can become distractions because, quite frankly, there's not a lot that most of us individually can do to impact and change those things. So if we become distracted by the news, we lose focus and become ineffective in doing what we can do with the people that we can impact. Part of this is to plan your day. In the morning, establish your focus and goals in line with your purpose. And I think this is I keep using the word profound, but it really is profound in the sense that here we have an opportunity to look at our day and say, is this helping me meet my purpose? Are there actions and activities that help me be better and help me make others better? And if not, then I need to maybe reevaluate those actions and activities. And then at the end of the day, to review and see what was accomplished and celebrate the win, and then look to set the agenda the next day. Or if there were areas that needed improvement, to do an assessment of saying, well, what could I have done differently? Now, off and on, I've done the beginning of the day planning, usually do that for work. However, I also need to do it in my overall life. But I have been real negligent in more cases than not in terms of the end of the day, celebrating what I did well, rather than getting caught up in, oh my gosh, all the stuff I have to do tomorrow. Our world of busyness in and of itself can impede on our ability to find and promote our cosmic work. So if we look at the day as a cycle, this breaks it down into a unit that can be managed. Also, if you look on page 28 and 29 on serial lesson 152, and this is based on the Green Book, I think you find that using your chart in a way that helps you to look at overcoming what he terms discordant thoughts and emotions really is a powerful tool. Because again, remember, the chart presents to us where we are and what the external forces that are influencing us are all about. It says the general characteristics of the thought, which are an expression of the thought cells mapped by a given planet, cannot be changed. But it is not too difficult a task to train thoughts that habitually have been the destructive qualities of the thought cells mapped by a given planet to express instead through that planet's constructive qualities. So if you've got a discordant sun, the sun cells cannot be made to express inferiority, but instead of experiencing through domination, they can be trained to express through significance. So it's a matter of looking at what the astrodynes are, whether they're harmonious, discordant, and then saying, okay, how can I then utilize and through constructive thought be able to influence and energize those planets, including the sun and the moon, which obviously aren't a planet, as we've talked about before, but all of these astral bodies to where that we can make use. I really like Venus right now, particularly given the attitude of many people in the world. Venus thought cells cannot be made to express hatred, but instead of expressing through unrestrained emotion, they can be trained to express through art or affection. And today, it's my personal opinion that too many do not have authority over their emotions, that their emotions are driving them rather than the other way around, that the thoughts are driving their emotions. Here we have an opportunity to use Venus. Mars we can use to build. Jupiter we can express benevolence. Saturn, we can use it, which is usually considered a harsh planet and usually not a beneficial one, that we can use it in a constructive way. Uranus in terms of invention, Neptune in terms of idealism rather than mystery and all the things that go with it. And Pluto can be used in cooperation, particularly as on page 29, that we talk about institutions that we may work or become a part of. I believe that this gives us the key to how to influence and overcome what are often very strong emotions with intentionality and with the ability to utilize the tools that we have. Most people do not have access to this information. They don't know about it. We do. We have that ability to make a change, not only in ourselves, but through changing ourselves, impact those around us in a very positive and constructive way. How do we do that? Well, that's what chapter 2 really talks about. And that is that we must form new habits. Habits are, as psychology has shown us, are kind of the driving force of the way that we cope, the way that we deal with life, the way that we through our past experiences, act and react. And we have to look at, are these habits, because some of them are very positive, but are all of them constructive? A way to set the mood for this is from page 30, an affirmation and the use of affirmations. Now, will affirmations in and of themselves change anything? No. All it does is set the stage for awareness and then the application of the tools that are present. So at the beginning and ending of each day, I'm alert to observe the approach of thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are disagreeable. And in their stead, I entertain only pleasant thoughts, feelings, and emotions. If those words don't resonate with you, rewrite it to where they do. Use your language, or use this, whatever is easier. It's kind of like, you probably have seen this driving a car for those that drive. If you turn and look to the left, guess which direction the car goes? To the left. You look to the right, it goes to the right. Same way with your thoughts. As you focus your thoughts, your feelings and emotions go the same way. The challenge is the persistence and the level of persistence that allow you to be able to continue with this. Also, there's some 4 essential practices that he talks about starting on page 32. We all have fallen victim to obsessive thoughts and feelings. Matter of fact, for some of us, this has approached at times, a place to where it has interrupted our ability to function properly. So there are some remedies for this. And it takes intentionality to do that. And sometimes you have to work with another person, a professional or a trusted advisor, to be able to even get perspective that you are caught in an obsessive cycle. But it does take courage, and courage can be substituted for apprehension. Constructive action must be substituted for irritation and sorrow. Self-improvement, the effort itself, must be substituted for self-pity. Self-pity will destroy us. I've been caught up in that too many times, but taking constructive action to change overcomes. Remember, you are not your emotions. Zane tells us that, modern psychology tells us that. They are feelings. Feelings pass. However, taking these constructive actions help those feelings to pass on quicker. Now, chapter 3, serial lesson 153, is actually, consider this was written in the 1940s, is fairly consistent with the use and the, shall we say, the impact and effect of various vitamins, minerals, and diet. However, we are not medical. Unless you are a licensed medical professional, please do not give medical advice. It's really important. In some states that can be detrimental, it can be illegal and get into a lot of trouble. But you can take these, and if you work with a naturalistic focused doctor or a holistic focused medical professional, utilizing these generalizations that Zane makes can impact and make a very positive note. Just remember that vitamins and many quote unquote natural remedies are also medications and drugs, just in a different form and format. They can be harmful as well as constructive. So again, work with your medical advisor to make sure that the approach you're taking is one that is appropriate and useful for your particular situation. One thing that you can do, and I strongly suggest this, is the use and practice of proper breathing. Pages 52 through 54. Various ancient traditions, from Buddhism, Hinduism, First Peoples from around the world, have known the power of the breath and how the constructive elements that can be brought into your life. One practice that he doesn't mention per se in this material But one effective way to deal with blood pressure issues is proper deep breathing. Now, is it enough in all cases? No. But in many cases, regular practicing, intentional practicing of deep breathing exercises can affect blood pressure very dramatically. It forces the body to respond. Again, by your intentional actions, your body reacts accordingly. So especially in this chapter, as I say, a lot of it has to do in just some generalizations and working with your medical professional to find how you can have a less intrusive and maybe more beneficial approach using these remedies, but everybody can practice these breathing exercises, and they are very helpful and constructive. Chapter 4, how many bazillion dollars are spent on trying to keep young? And yet, it's a very simple process and that we can use. A lot of it is around the last section, 73 through 78, on youthful thinking and practice. Now, our bodies will age, and that's not a bad thing. Though it can be frustrating because we may or may not have the endurance and the physical strength that we had before. But even in our affliction, that physical affliction that we may have or come to, we can keep our mind sharp. We can keep all of the elements that end up being reflected in our spirit and our outward appearance of how people perceive us. Someone who's happy, you want to be around. Someone who's vivacious, unless it's over the top, is someone that brings joy to the room. So what you want to do is you want to keep learning, keep engaging, keep challenging yourself. So as you do this, the cognitive processes will continue to evolve. The brain has something called plasticity. It wasn't known in the time that Zane wrote. And that is that new neural connections and growth of neurons continues even into the late elderly stage. But it's triggered and driven by learning new things and challenging yourself. Part of that also is that last element of keeping yourself physically active within the bounds of what you can do and as is appropriate. But the more that you're able to press that limit, again, working with your medical professional to be safe, the healthier you'll be, the more vital you'll be. And it also affects your cognitive abilities as well. Part of that too is the attitude of enthusiasm, of looking to enjoy life. Do you expect to enjoy life, or do you expect it to be misery? You're going to be right either way. So I choose to expect it to be a positive experience. Yes, there's going to be ups and downs, but at the end of the day, I look for it to be a joyful, exciting, dare I say, fun adventure. And this is an expectation. But when we set expectations and are consistent with it and persistent, like he said, look at the reward that we receive and the ability of the socialization and how people want to be around us and with us. So there are some specific aspects of, again, your chart, and note the impact and position of the moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Saturn. All of these tell us a story. And then using our ability to overcome these negative influences that may be present, give us the chance to change and to affect how we think, how we feel, and how we act. Again, these cosmic forces are there. We aren't going to change them, but we can change how they influence us, how they impact us, and that this is our life. And we have a responsibility to take charge. In chapter 5, serial lesson 155, what is attractive? Well, a lot of that really has to do with adapting a behavior and behavior patterns that draw people to us rather than repel people. Most of us don't want to be around someone who complains or who is just unhappy, but yet we are attracting people when we are happy, when we can set the stage. And I didn't say this was easy, but note the behavior patterns stated in pages 86 through 92, and particularly those external forces that are represented on 87, 88, and on page 92 with the positions of the planets. You know, it all really comes down to that the statement on page 91 and the whole book in book 9 on mental alchemy is about that the fundamental urges back of human nature are not learned. We have a series of urges to be significant, to reproduce, to all these things that Zane talks about and will even more in these later books. However, we can manage those urges. We can convert those urges into positive rather than negative and potentially damaging results that can come. The characteristics of an attractive personality, again, pages 94 through 100. I won't go through those. These are things that you need to look and say, how can I incorporate? How can I and where can I apply these and bring about the type of person I want to be? Now, a habit system is a break in our astral body, and it can be a positive break or a negative break. So utilizing those is, and how we utilize those is of utmost importance. We want to cultivate good habits, and by good, I meant being constructive habits and habits that benefit others as well as ourselves, but with a focus outside of ourselves. We need also to make associations as a key to memory. In other words, the ability to be reminded of positive and enlightening things in our life and bring that back in and use that as a trigger to again generate more of those same feelings. And just like anything else, associating pleasurable feelings with new behaviors and thoughts. To form a new habit is not just repetition. Yes, it is repetition. Some people believe that it evolves over a period of approximately 1 month. However, in many cases, it can be much longer. But how you feel about it when you're doing it, like exercise. Most of us are not real hep on going to the gym, but yet the benefits of the gym can be very rewarding. Focusing not on the moment of unease or discomfort that we have at the gym, but focus on the health benefits that you receive because you went to the gym is one way to reinforce and establish a positive habit system that is for the benefit of your body, which means enables you then to be a benefit of others. Self-esteem, page 113 to 116. Look at the power of the sun, along with respect of the others. How do you have friends? How do you put a positive mark on those people you come in contact with? Part of it is encouraging them and supporting them. Also, by commenting on their good qualities, not to an end of thinking you're going to gain something. Most people can sense that or sniff that out. But the idea of people like to hear what they do right. We all do. We all like to be told, hey, you did a good job. Or, wow, that was such an excellent presentation you gave. Or really, I don't think he's on here, but I know I hear reports both of he and Vanessa's classes in the medical astrology. All of these are making changes in people's lives, giving them the tools. It costs you nothing to recognize someone else, but yet the benefit that they gain And the encouragement that they gain is something that cannot be overstated. There are several astral bodies and arrangements that are of note for influence, and that includes the position and aspects of Venus, Jupiter, the 11th and 2nd house. And it's interesting, on page 118, who do you think are your best friends? That second paragraph I'm going to read to you, because I think it's rather profound and very interesting. Friendship of the finest type, however, is always based upon a sympathetic understanding and a particular mutual exchange of ideas and energy. The type of person with whom relations can be established may be determined from the birth chart. Those whose dominant planet is a planet sorely affected in your birth chart may become good friends, but will not attract to you fortunate events. Isn't that interesting? Those persons whose dominant planet is a planet well aspected in your chart, insofar as you associate with them, will be friendly disposed and will tend to attract to you beneficial events. And it kind of goes on from there in terms of understanding friends. And we should not make friends just in terms of what we can gain from it, but there must be mutual benefit. In other words, a friendship empowers them and they empower you. The more that we have this type of benefit of relationship rather than a one-sided relationship, it grows, matures, and evolves into something that becomes life-changing, and over a period of time can change the individuals around us. Chapter 7, very practical, about how to get employment, particularly as we're in this gig economy right now. For many individuals who may or may not have remote work, or who have remote work rather than going into an office, note the planetary influences based on page 126 through 128, and the idea of forming new habits one at a time. He emphasizes something that, again, positive psychology and many other aspects of psychology believe and utilize, in that if you can visualize the type of work and the type of job or a project that must be completed, you have a higher success of coming to pass. In sports psychology, one of the fundamentals is making sure that you walk through and can see yourself performing in that sport or activity at a high level. Those who visualize that over a period of time have greater success than those who do not. There's also the 3 considerations of employment on page 135 and the 10th house considerations on page 140. I'm not going to go through those today, only because these can be very personal. And they need to be examined and seeing how to integrate these within your life. And can they provide that type of benefit and activity for you in a way that is positive? Now, how to make money, again, the birth chart is the key here. Though we often say that the progress chart becomes more influential, especially past the age of 50, everything is really founded upon the birth chart. And it's important to understand the best planet in the chart and the worst, and how to calculate that, especially if it's within or has aspects to the 2nd house. The ruling planet of that 2nd house may need to be energized if there is a planet there, or the ruling house if it's not within that. And then how to use the progress chart is talked about in page 152 through 160. Many times we've been told how to calculate it. We look at it in the computer program, but we don't necessarily know what to do with it. Well, here are some very practical and applicable lessons that can and should be followed. Chapter 9, Sarah Lesson 159, How to Achieve Honors. And I think this maybe is a little misunderstood. It's more how to make a difference. It's not about the accolades that you and I may receive. It's more about how to make sure in the process and who we are so that we can be that difference within the world around us. So one thing he calls for is the establishment of personal standard of values. And this was a concept that we teach in ethics classes on page 166 through 168, but outside of that, I've not seen very much discussion. Yet, what are your standards? How do you rank the values that you hold dear in your life, and maybe those you should or could? How do you move up the chart and the interaction of these various valuables and integrate them into your cosmic calling and your vocation as appropriate? This also then plays very closely in with your personality traits. Again, we are who we are. That does not mean that we cannot enhance and improve those aspects, and how to identify and address. We often are very blind to our own weakness and sometimes even our strengths. This is where working in community or with others and having true friends that are willing to call you on your bad stuff as well as to compliment you on your good is of critical importance. And there's also preparation for the next steps. You know, we don't believe and practice in reincarnation within the Church of Light. However, we believe that there is a next step, that we are progressing to another existence in another realm where our work continues. And so we have some thoughts and, if you will, some guidelines are set here. This will be an area of additional topic in later books that, again, is extremely important. In chapter 10, Zero Lesson 160, how to be successful, and I would rather reframe this in terms of relationships. It may not be just in a marital union, because relationships exist outside of what in the 1940s was considered a marriage relationship. Just realize that your family of origin is really the foundation for and predictor of future relationships. If these have not been positive, if there was abuse, if there was various deficiencies in the family of origin, then there's some intentional work that needs to be done to help overcome those challenges, because sooner or later you become your parents. Now, that's not a curse. In many ways, it's a blessing, but it's also the truth. As a parent, I remember, or growing up, I remember saying, well, I'll never say that to my kid. And then as a parent, you find yourself saying the exact words and maybe the same intonation as to what your parents said. And you catch yourself and say, oh my gosh, I've become my parents. Or like the commercial that's popular on TV, where people become adult homeowners and they become their parents, and all the funny and sometimes negative things that come from that. We are not bound by our heredity, by our upbringing, but we are needing to address it. If you do not address it, it will continue its influence. Also, that comes into play in choosing your significant other. Pages 195 through 200 address this in a way that I think is interesting, but it gives you some insight in terms of how to judge and be able to evaluate that. Sistry charts are mentioned, but are not really evaluated. And in this coursework, we do not have the shall we say, have the focus on that, but it's something that is a separate area of study that is significant, to be able to take two charts and compare them together and to say, what are the common threads? What are the areas of concern? And then taking action based upon those external influences to say, how can we make this work? And I think that's one of the most important things. There are very few situations that can't be made to work. Some of them obviously are more challenging and more difficult than others. Serial lesson number 11, which is the last, is how to have a pleasant home. And again, I may rephrase that. This probably looks at a cultural phenomena of the 40s, 50s, and 60s of, should probably be saying, how do we adapt and make the best of where we are? You know, the whole idea of grow where you're planted, but you do have some items of variability, like how do you select a location? How do you select a home? How do you even know if you're going to be moving? How do you decide between all of these things? Well, the information is given within the chart. It is all there. And it's a matter then of taking a proactive stance to be able to interpret and then to apply that mental alchemy that'll be necessary to, if you will, make the adaptations necessary to have the best out of the environment. Again, there are very few situations that cannot be made better. And I would dare say, I think every situation can be made better. The question is, do we have the persistence, and are we dedicated enough to make the changes sometimes within ourselves, as well as changing those influences outside? In pages 212 through 220, this reflects again from the periods of the 1940s, some of the cultural expectations of roles in the house, of kind of who does what, and other aspects that in our society probably would not be considered relevant. Look to where you are. Look to the environment that you are in, and say, okay, what can I do to help that person I'm with or that situation I'm in? It's not all about you. And in many cases, it's more about them. And if you're in a family situation or a family arrangement or a community, then the onus is as much or more on you than it is on them. You are responsible for your actions. You are in control of these things that take place. Now it's more of a matter of taking advantage of them. And if you will, that is the book. Now, I want to add a personal anecdote here, only because it couldn't have happened at a better or worse time. You know, the book really focuses on the idea that we are to find our cosmic purpose, and that we are to focus on making sure that we extrude, if you will, that we are expressing that in a way that is positive. I really love teaching, especially in university setting. Interestingly enough, I was being, and the word really is coerced, into more an administrative role than a student-facing role. This last week, I finally told them, I'm not going to do that. And ultimately, it may cost me my teaching position that I had, because I can do the administrative. I don't want to. I don't feel that at this stage of my life, it is where I can have the greatest impact. So I took a stand on doing my cosmic work ahead, if you will, of what may be an expanded role in it, forcing me or leading me into another area. Sometimes you have to make the hard choices. It could cost me economically, but in the long run, it won't cost going that direction was going to cost me my happiness. And at the end of the day, if we're not happy, if we're not satisfied, if we're not joyful and looking forward to doing the vocation or the cosmic work that we're called to do, then it's not going to be a good existence for myself or for people around me. So sometimes we have to make choices. And hopefully yours won't be as dramatic. It may be more dramatic than what I did. This just occurred in this last week. So for me, it's very fresh and relevant. And I believe this book in particular gave me the tools to deal with it better. Don't think it was easy. It has not. It has emotionally just been a series of highs and lows, of doubts and concerns and everything else. But in the foundation, I know that I can confront it, that I can overcome it, that I can learn from the experience and benefit from it. All right, so that's our, chapter 12, how to be happy. The balance, the desire with emotional reactions. Look for and be consistent in terms of your expectations. And that is using the Church of Light mantra, which is found on page 227, which is another affirmative statement. But be careful of the dangers of extremes. He talks about this a lot, and we see examples throughout the world. On one extreme, we have self-indulgence, and the other self-denial. Neither are beneficial, and both can be and often are destructive. While we are on a scale with the two extremes being self-indulgent and self-denial, and we move along those scales, continually seeking for the middle, being self-aware and knowing these things is of extreme importance. Also, lastly, on pages 226 to 236, it talks about the urges and the things that drive us and that we are constantly finding, and that are powers that sometimes are almost overwhelming. The desire for significance and self-esteem, the desire for adventure, security, response, all of these are impactful upon our lives, and areas that we must utilize, but we also must be sometimes aware of and be concerned about, that we don't end up swinging to the extreme of being driven by our urges and not, if you will, being in control of our thoughts and emotions and being the master of them rather than them being the master of us. Also, in 236 through 237, note the influence of Sun and Mars and his definition of supreme happiness. Now, I'm not going to tell you what he says there. Look it up for yourself. And the key is happiness outside of self. As you focus on your service to others, focus on accomplishments, not possessions. Seek quality of life and not quantity. Often we get caught in the realm of thinking that buying this or doing that will make me happy. Only you can make you happy. And the easiest way to do that is in service to others. There are opportunities within the Church of Light. There are opportunities within your community. There are opportunities within your family, and possibly even, probably even in your vocation or your cosmic calling. Take advantage of those. Utilize those. Make a difference in someone else's life, and you will make a difference in yours. All right, that's our time. We've actually gone 55 minutes. We will share in the closing ceremony, and then we'll have a period of whole. Oh, do we want to cancel the recording?